Hello, welcome back, or welcome to this video if it's the first one you've seen from me. Um, I'm going to do another analysis of the Mexican aliens, so-called Mexican aliens, which are really called the Nazca tridactyls, more accurately, the small tridactyls. And I'm going to argue further that they strongly resemble theropod dinosaurs, with all of the implications that this might have for the world. So, first of all, this is based upon a presentation to the Mexican Congress on the 13th of September. So, if you haven't seen this video before, this one here, then please go and see it. Where's my pointer option gone? No, pointer options, laser pointer, there we go. If you haven't seen this video before, then please go and do it at this link here. So pause and go and see it. A word of caution. I don't know anything about these other than what I've seen from the internet and read books, etc. I've never seen the samples. I can't guarantee that it's not an elaborate hoax. And I can't guarantee if the samples are correct that my analysis as presented here is false. It is correct. So just a word of warning there, please. But I think I'm presenting sincerely here, and I hope that I'm doing my best to shed some light onto this issue. And I'm doing this because it's one of the most important issues that humanity can face, I think. I mean, not only are we alone in the universe, are we actually the most intelligent species that's evolved on this planet? And maybe they're still here watching us, watching this video even. Okay, so the Mexican Congress presentation describes two small bodies which were discovered near Nazca, the site of the Nazca lines, on the 13th. So they were discovered, I think, in 2016, 2017, something like that. There have been so far 20 separate species, 20 separate specimens, and from two species. Now, in a book which I'll come to in a moment, it describes how one of the species actually has human DNA, but it has tridactyl fingers and toes, and it has a very large head. So it's very strange that it has three fingers. It's human sized, three fingers and toes, just like the little tiny corpses that we'll be looking at now. Anyway, they mapped its DNA sequence to within modern humanity. It's kind of it's a Homo sapiens. Well, it's a hominid, very clearly. Okay, so once you've watched that presentation to the Mexican Congress, just be aware that the forensic specialist who reported on the body, his name is Jose de Jesus Salce Benitez. He's a lieutenant commander and director of the Mexican Centro de Estudios Navales Ingenieros de la Salud, or the Health Science Naval Studies Center. As you can see, I don't speak Spanish, so I probably butchered that. Not to matter. He has a master's degree in forensic medicine from the Military School of Health Graduates of the Mexican Army, a diploma in aerospace medicine awarded by the Mexican Air Force under the Ministry of National Defense, and he has a diploma in forensic anthropology from the National School of Anthropology and History. So in other words, this guy's qualified, and he's saying that the bodies are legitimate. Just for a moment, maybe we think we should. I know there's a lot of credibility issues with Mexico, but I'd say there are credibility issues with somewhere like the United States at the moment. If you took these to the United States, maybe they would just vanish and never appear again. So in addition to his military service, he's an adjunct professor at the School of Anthropology and History run by the American government, and also of the University of London, which needs no further introduction. So On the 21st of October, 6 days ago, I made a video proposing that the tridactyls could be theropod dinosaurs. I don't know if you've seen that or not. That was based only upon information presented to Congress in Mexico. Since then, I've found more information. There's a documentary on the Nazca mummies from Gaia.com, and you can watch episode 10 of that. It's either 10, which is a compilation. Each episode goes 7 to 10 minutes, that sort of thing. And episode 10 is 1 hour, a 1 hour and 10-minute compilation of the entire series, and at the moment it's able to be streamed free of charge. Okay, there's a book, The Mysterious Mummies of Nazca, Eyewitness Testimony by Dr. Konstantin Korotkov, and I've in the meantime read that book. And there's also a document called the Miles Paper, which I will look at on the next slide. So you can get that from here, themilespaper.com, and it's I think there's 70, 90 pages, something like that. And what Dr. Miles does is, he's a retired paleontologist from Utah, and he does a type characterization, a formal type characterization of this specimen here, which is one of the ones that was presented to the Mexican Parliament. This is the female. They call her Josefina, and I think the male's name is Alberto. That's not important though. So Miles's position, paraphrased, is that the tridactyls are aliens. He says the rib structure is unique. That is, it commences a long time after the pectoral girdle up here. So normally with all other vertebrates, then, all vertebrates known until now, the pectoral girdle starts here, and then we start get ribs coming off the vertebrae just immediately under there. The foramen magnum, which is the hole by which the spine enters the skull, is round usually, and here it's square, so it's very atypical. These things only have one bone in the lower arms and legs. So for instance, we've got the radius and the ulna, but they've just got one bone in their lower arm. They have a unique hand and foot structure, basically 3 toes and a reduced number of bones in the foot than we have, and they have some novel holes in the skull, etc. So his position is that these are unique on Earth. No intermediate forms exist in the fossil record. They appear out of nowhere. Therefore, they must be alien. Okay, that's Mills's conclusion. So I'm going to argue that these are all derived character states built upon a vertebrate, and particularly a theropod dinosaur body plan. My argument is a cladistic one, which is based upon shared primitive states, which are called plesiomorphies by evolutionists, by taxonomists, and apomorphies define derived states are called apomorphies. So for instance, we evolved from reptiles. We originally had cold blood, that was the plesiomorphic condition, and now we've got warm blood, that's an apomorphy. And we don't really need this, but all mammals have warm blood to an extent, and so that is called a synapomorphy. So it's an apomorphy that is inherited in a whole group. It's characteristic of the whole group. Another one for mammals would be hair. For placental mammals, it would be secreting milk. Or actually, for all mammals do that, secreting milk. Those are all synapomorphies. But anyway, above the primitive vertebrate state, we have apomorphies, new morphologies, or atypical morphologies. So let's just have a go here. And here's looking at plesiomorphy and apomorphy. So here we've got a cynodont. It's a small, furry, proto-mammal lineage organism, and it gave rise to platypus and bats. Okay, now I'd just like you to imagine a thought experiment where at the Cretaceous-Ternary boundary, where the dinosaurs went extinct, I would like you to imagine that all mammals also went extinct, except either the lineage giving rise to platypus or the lineage giving rise to echolocating bats. So we've got no fossil record of these things, except that one of these species appears. So the platypus has these webbed feet, and it's got this weird duck-looking bill, and it can electrosense using this bill and hunt living prey underwater. So they've done experiments where you can put a dead prawn under a rock and this platypus will swim by, but if you put a live battery under the rock, the platypus will flip the rock over and try and get the battery, because it can sense the electric field, and living organisms have an electric field. So this is a highly specialized organ here. So and let's just throw into our thought experiment to boot that the brain on the platypus is much larger than it is, and it appears to be intelligent. So we get specimens of these found in modern times, and no fossil record going back, and this was actually the case with platypus, that there was no fossil record for a long time. In the 1980s, so the first fossil ancestor of platypus was discovered in the Cretaceous era, the time of the dinosaurs. But anyway, these features were considered so strange when the platypus was first discovered that when it was taken back to England, then it was accused of being a fake, that an animal like this couldn't exist. If you like, the English were saying it's an alien, right? So, and that's what I think is happening with the Nazca tridactyls. They're so different from theropods that people are saying it's an alien. It can't have evolved here. But I think it shows so many primitive features in common, so many plesiomorphies that are reptilian and that are theropod, that it should be a highly derived theropod. And it's had 66 million years to evolve since the time of the dinosaurs, and so that's lots of time to accumulate change. The question is, why don't we have a fossil record for it? And that may have something to do with its large brain size, actually. Maybe it's smart enough to hide its fossils. It may also have, I'll get into later, maybe it lives underground or something. It lived someplace where we didn't look for it. And so that's why we don't have fossils. And a similar argument, if we don't go to the platypus route, if we went towards echolocation. So we can see this guy here, this ancestor, he's got his forearms and legs, he's got his quite normal looking head. If we'd have found a dog, then there'd be kind of no problem, so that we could recognise the basic body plan. But these guys have got wings, they've got these huge ears, which this guy didn't. He's got no well-developed ears yet. And they've got this echolocation, this weird-shaped noses. Doesn't matter which one of these we take. They're all really, really kind of weird-looking animals. So we might say that this organism did not originate on Earth because it's so different from the cynodonts. But I would take you back and say, look at this, look at the feet, look at the legs, look at the bones in the hands. You can actually trace all of those back here, and it shares the plesiomorphic condition, the primitive condition of having a vertebrate body plan. And I'm going to argue that that's exactly the same for the Nazca tridactyl corpses. So just a brief look at dinosaur evolution. What I'm saying is that it's a theropod dinosaur. So these guys developed 3 toes. I had a slide on that in my last talk. You can go and have a look at that. All these yellow guys here are the theropods, and this orangey group here are the AVLA, and these all went extinct except for modern birds. This lineage went on. So all of these other ones went extinct, and we just got one lineage that went out and radiated and became all modern birds. Okay, so the sources of the images I'm going to use are, essentially, I'm going to be taking images from the Miles paper. If you see an image like this and it's not credited, then it comes from the Miles paper. Some of them are also from Korotkov 2019. And this talk, well, I meant to say before this talk, I've got about 70 slides, so it's probably going to be an hour and a quarter, I'm guessing something like that. I'm sorry about the long time, but I don't think I can do this in any shorter time. Maybe we get lucky and it is shorter. So, corrections from my previous talk. I said that the Mexican Congress presentation was September the 12th. It's actually on the 13th. So my problems with the Wayback Machine, I was thinking that the date in the Wayback Machine was only on September the 13th, but that's okay if they presented on the 13th. That means they uploaded the sequences that day. And the DNA sequencing was performed by the Sen4 Gen Lab, which I got from Korotkov's book, and not the lab that I speculated about previously. So, I'm not the first to propose that these are dinosaurs. From Korotkov, he's discussing a 2018 presentation by Peruvian academics to the Peruvian government, and he says, in general, all came to the conclusion that the anatomical structure of all mummies are different from human in varying degrees, and yet so complex that any possibilities of counterfeiting is eliminated. Jose Lopez made an interesting suggestion. He noted the skeleton structure of the small creatures was most similar to that of some dinosaurs, just like I did. When I looked at them, I said dinosaurs, also having hollow bones and 3 fingers. Unfortunately, this hypothesis cannot be verified without having dinosaur DNA. And then again on page 73-74, specialists of Incari Institute from Cusco suggested that the creatures might be close to some species of dinosaurs who had 3 fingers. However, this hypothesis cannot be tested. We have no way to compare the DNA of these creatures with the DNA of dinosaurs. So I'd like to point out that that's actually incorrect. We do have a way. And I've just taken this, what is it, about 25, 30 sequences here, and I've taken it's a gene called PGRMC1, which is the one that I work on. It's relatively well conserved, so this kind of works over this. We've got here groups ranging from fish through amphibians, snakes, lizards, turtles, crocodilians, birds, and then mammals. Okay, and we've got a sort of a handful of representatives from each one, probably 3 or so from each group. And actually, if you see, amphibians are kind of on both sides here. But if we look at, here's the fish, the zebrafish here, this is an out group, and then we come into here, and this branch here, we've got a toad here, and over on this side we've got Xenopus, which is also a toad. So they're quite different from, well, it's a long time since they separated. But then we go up here, and we've got the next amphibian up here is also here. So you can see, although the amphibians separate on both sides of the tree, they're actually very close to the root of the tree. So it's okay. If I spent a bit more time, I could have put all of those on the one side. Okay, so then we come up and we get snakes, lizards, turtles. So what this algorithm does, it's called multiple alignment fast Fourier transform. It's just one of many methods that are available, and it just basically lines all the nucleotides up in the genes and gets the best fit, and then constructs a putative evolutionary tree. Now, it's not going to be the actual evolutionary tree. It's because some of these genes may have evolved faster than others, and so the sequence doesn't actually reflect their position in the tree. For instance, we can see that, where is it? The mouse is grouping with monotremes rather than with placental mammals here. Okay, so the mouse gene seems to have changed a little bit more than its other placental mammals, so it looks a bit different, and it's ended up in here. But nevertheless, we can tell it's not a bird. Okay, and so into this tree, I've put this test sequence here, and it's actually a test sequence that I reconstructed out of the database that they published, and it happens to be human, and it happens to be the human PGRMC1 gene. So, and it's only about maybe 250 nucleotides in total. So, oh no, sorry, it'd be 300 and something nucleotides this test sequence was. And based upon alignments of those 300 and something nucleotides, it's able to produce this tree here. Okay, the tree is not very robust. You see these numbers here. That's the probability that that branching is real. So if you like, if I got something here falling down here where the dinosaurs would fall, between birds and other archosaurs, crocodilians are the other archosaurs, so we would expect the dinosaurs to fall in here somewhere. If I got a sequence falling in here somewhere, then I'd go and get like 10 or 15 versions from each genera, and I'd put those in. It'd take a long time to run the test, or even 20 from each, and then I would go through by hand and remove any sequences that had accumulated atypical gaps and things like that, to really get the alignment perfect, as good as I can, and get these numbers here to be as high as possible. But that's not necessary now. We can see that it would work. I'm just putting it in there to so if I had put a dinosaur sequence in there, then we would get the test popping up down here somewhere, and that would immediately tell us what the answer was actually. Then I'd have to go in and do some more hard work to nail it down. But you would already know from a quick test like this that it's the case. So it's not true that we can't tell if it's a dinosaur or not. If we get our hands on this DNA sequence, we can tell if it's a dinosaur. Okay? Sorry. So this species here is called Nazca 01, or Josephina, which Miles uses as the type specimen to describe the species. So a type specimen is the first specimen described, and it has all the characteristics that describe the species. So the thing to see here, it's got this metal plate implanted under the breast. Miles notes that there's a broken collarbone here, and he thinks that the plate there is to support the collarbone, give some strength to the chest. We see that the ribs, it's like these hula hoops running below the chest here. That's not typical vertebrate, okay, but it has like vertebrate like eggs, and it has a very large brain. As Miles points out, the skull comes, the neck comes in at the base of the skull and not at the back of the skull, where all other vertebrates do, which implies to me, I'll get to later, which implies to me that the rear of the brain has expanded, in contrast to our cerebellum, our forebrain expansion. And we can get to all the other features later. So Josephina suffered a probable large cat attack, but recovered. So if people are thinking like there's some super advanced species flying around in flying saucers and kidnapping people and genetically modifying the population, that may or may not be, but this particular species, this particular specimen appeared to have been attacked by a large cat and recovered. You can tell it's recovered because the bones have healed. So either whoever was looking after her was able to nurture her back, or she was able to nurture herself back. So can we conclude that the tridactyl spine and ribs are totally foreign to this planet, or could they have evolved from a theropod? Let's look first at the vertebrae, ribs and gastralia. On my 21st of October talk, I proposed the continuous round ribs were theropod gastralia, and Miles argues emphatically, in fact, that they are gastralia, implying a saurian or reptilian origin. But nevertheless, he somehow managed to conclude that the specimens are alien and didn't evolve on Earth. So this was from my 21st of October talk, and I was asking whether these little shadows here may be fusions of ribs and gastralia. And I went on to show that these theropod dinosaurs had gastralia, which are these bones running along the abdomen, which provided it's kind of an armor plating, if you like, for the guts. Okay, so a concept I'd like you to understand here is that In skeletal evolution, very often this conserved feature. So for instance, in our neck we have 7 vertebrae, and even in the giraffe's neck, even though it's so much longer than ours, it also has 7 vertebrae. So changing numbers of vertebrae and ribs and things like that is kind of a big deal. So let's see whether that actually did happen. Here's a Tyrannosaurus rex, and if we count these vertebrae here, normally there would be cervical, thoracic and lumbar vertebrae, but because because in the alien that these guys here don't have ribs, Miles has called them dorsal. Anyway, so here we can see that these 3 gastralia here are fused with these 3 ribs, and there are 2 ribs in front of those, or anterior to those, which don't have gastralia fused to them. Okay, so I'm going to say we have 11 gastralia-free vertebrae in this Tyrannosaurus rex. The tridactyl cervical vertebrae. So we've got 5 what it calls cervicals, 5 cervical vertebrae there. Then the dorsal vertebrae, and he counts dorsal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He gives 6 dorsals. Okay, so we've got cervicals 1 to 5, dorsals 1 to 6, and the dorsals 1 to 6 have no ribs, whereas dorsals 7 to 15 have small ribs fused with these gastrulae. So, the ribs, Miles points out the CT scan and X-ray cross-sections show one very important feature that previous authors missed. He's talking about Korotkov's book. There's an analytical paper published in there. Which means that they've tried to publish, they've written it up, they've tried to publish it and couldn't get it published anywhere, talking about, aliens. And so the only place they could publish it was in this book, apparently. That's my guess, I don't know. Each section of ribs is composed of 3 parts. Short rib, gastralia, short rib. 2 short ribs arise laterally and are connected by a gastralia. So in other words, they have little ribs coming off the vertebra, and these are fused to this semicircular gastralia, which makes this round hoop-shaped rib cage. A very distinctive feature not known in any other organism. And the gastralia present in this species points to a saurian origin. And if we just look at the definition of saurian, any large reptile, especially a dinosaur or other extinct form. So he's telling us that the gastralia point to a dinosaur origin. But on the other hand, he's concluded that that they come from outer space because they're so different than dinosaurs. And from a cladistic point of view, we can see that the primitive states, the shared primitive states, tell us about dinosaur affinity, and highly derived states tell us about the characteristics of a new species within that group. So it doesn't mean that it doesn't belong to the group, it means it's highly derived and different from that group. So we've got cervicals 1 to 5, dorsals 1 to 6, which is 11 gastralia-free vertebrae. And that is exactly the same number of gastralia-free vertebrae that we saw in Tyrannosaurus rex. So I'm proposing that whatever the lifestyle, the evolutionary history of this species, it has not required these ribs here, the ones that are not fused with gastralia, and so it's lost them over time. So in fact, I'm saying that 2 of these so-called dorsals, or 2 of the dorsals 1 to 6 should have originally had ribs. So if we look at the pectoral girdle, that's these bones around here. The ancestral tetrapod, we've got a scapula that comes around the back. We've got the humerus, radius and ulnar, and the bones of the hand, the carpals, metatarsals, and phalanges, which are the fingers. Okay, this is important terminology. Then in here we've got the clavicle and the coracoid. Okay, here's we can see a highly derived theropod dinosaur, a bird. We can see here that we've got the scapula. We've got the coracoid coming here, joining to the sternum, the bone here, and the tridactyls have no sternum, but they do have a coracoid, and they have no clavicle. Sorry, they have a clavicle but no coracoid. So, so here we can see the condition in the tridactyl. It's got this clavicle, and it hinges in the middle. There's no sternum, but the clavicle can hinge in the middle. I guess we don't need to take more from that. Miles thinks that the metal implant was to support the clavicles, which had been broken. That sounds reasonable to me. That it's some sort of a prosthetic device. So not all theropod dinosaurs contain a furcula, a wishbone. A furcula is formed by the fusion of the clavicles, and we can see that we've got two groups here which don't have a furcula, and maybe one of these groups could have given rise to the Nazca tridactyls, and I'd favour the ornithomimosaurs, which are feathered and obtain most calories from plants, and it pretty much looks like the tridactyls were herbivores because they've totally lost their teeth. They just have sort of grinding plates in their mouth. The scapula, it's triangular and looks a little human. There's an acromion process, which is that's a human one there, but it's also present in the tridactyls, and it hangs over the shoulder, so there would have been muscles coming off that to control the arms. Well, what is pretty clear is that these guys are not going to have a lot of strength. So one of these guys is not going to arm wrestle with Arnold Schwarzenegger in his heyday. The scapula there, you can basically it's pretty much the same organization as the human one. The pectoral girdle, I'd say it's unambiguously tetrapod. It's lost some bones, yes, but it has tetrapod features. So we don't get to name bones that are similar to our bones and then say they didn't evolve from the same evolutionary history that produced us. So I'd say that they have a clavicle and we have a clavicle because of common evolutionary ancestry. If we go to the limbs, the pectoral, the pelvic girdles. So here we've got a pubis and ischium, this is kind of the hip, and then we've got a femur, fibia, tibia tarsals, metatarsals, and phalanges. So once again, you can see that these two structures, the arm and the leg, are actually quite similar in the ancestral vertebrate, and they're homologous structures. Similar genes drive them in embryology. Okay, so if we look at theropod pectoral and pelvic girdles, the theropods have got a thing going on where the pectoral girdle is being reduced. So in their development, there's some genes which have been mutated to reduce the growth of the arms. And maybe this is the stage from which those theropod or those tridactyls with their highly atypical vertebrate arms arose. From a genetic background which was already kind of in a flying transition from a vertebrate state to a kind of a weird state. They've already got 3 toes and 3 fingers and 3 feet. So the theropods have basically we've got the phalanges, metatarsals, tarsals, fibula, tibia, and femur. Okay, so this is a lot simpler than the base than the ancestral tetrapod. Already the theropods are much simpler. So that this would be what we have to consider our corpses to be compared with. So the tridactyl pectoral girdle. The long bones of this species are a much simpler construction, lacking many of the features that are found in human skeletons. This is miles. They have a single bone in place of the ulna and radius and have only a tibia with no fibula. They have unique joints as well. So just the radius and ulna, they have one bone there. Carpals and metatarsals. They have a tibia with no fibula as well. So basically in their arm and their lower arm and lower leg they have one bone, and they have an even simpler foot and hand construction than these theropod dinosaurs. These are theropod dinosaurs here. So, interestingly, in the knee, or in the elbow, we have these little bony projections. So, I'm going to propose, in the background where we have this genetic reduction of arms and legs in the theropod lineage, remember Tyrannosaurus with its pathetic little arms at the front? So in this lineage, something's going on with plasticity, embryological plasticity in arm and leg development. And I'm going to suggest that the ulna and radius have become reduced to these little bony knobs found in what's now its elbow, as long as one of the metacarpals. So I'm going to suggest that the ulneus, one of the carpals, I'm going to suggest that the ulneus, what he calls a cross between a radius and an ulna, is actually a metacarpal, and that the radius, ulna, and other carpals are in these little bony knobs here. So, if we had a living specimen and could look at gene expression, we'd be able to tell that, because each of these bones that have homeobox genes, that they're expressed in a certain tissue-specific pattern-generating systematic progression of pattern through the body. And if we could find, for instance, that we had the genes expressed in these little bony knobs that are usually expressed in these bones in another vertebrate, then we would be able to say, yes, this is the radius, this is the ulna, etc. Okay, we don't have the option to do that. The gene expression, this corpse is very old, and something like messenger RNA is labile, and we wouldn't be able to measure that. Even if we could, we would have to have some experiment. So that usually you say human ethics, but this is obviously a sentient being, or quite probably a sentient being, and so there would be sentient experimental ethics strictures would apply to an experiment like this. We couldn't just take a specimen and sacrifice it and assay with what the gene expression is in certain tissues. It's looks like it's a smart animal, like us, probably better than us. Okay, the ilia, basically not really much to say. I just put that in because it's in miles. The legs kind of sit on the ilia. No great detail there. It has just one, what he calls a tibia. The lower limb is represented by only one bone, the tibia. The fibula is absent. The tibia is 9.5 centimeters and is difficult to get a good measurement from the CT scans. Okay, is it really a tibia? Because, the foot, so we've got these digits, and then we've got this block of bone behind there, and then it articulates with what he calls the the tibia. So, and the bottom of this bone forms the heel. So there's no ankle as we know it in conventional in other vertebrates. I'll say other vertebrates because I think this is a vertebrate. So what I think is going on is that once again we have these little bony outcrops in the knees, little bony nodules, and I think that these are the tibia, fibula, and tarsals, and that actually this, what he called a tibia, is actually a metatarsal, and the other metatarsal is probably that bony lump, or maybe it's one of the phalanges, but I guess that one of the metatarsals is forms the bony lump in the foot, and the other metatarsal forms what became this leg here, the tibia, and that all these other bones are reduced into these bony knots in the knees. So, in other words, it's a highly derived state. There's no other organism like this existing on the planet, but it's quite possible that this is a vertebrate. It's just a highly derived vertebrate, a highly apomorphic theropod. Doesn't mean it's not a theropod. Birds are also very highly apomorphic theropods. So the skull anatomy. The tridactyl skull just looks like a terrestrial vertebrate. From my October the 21st talk, I said here's a theropod dinosaur, and here's the tridactyl skull. I said that we would need to have massive erosion of the post-orbital. Actually, I was focusing on this when I said that. It should have really been the frontals. So if we want to have this brain case evolve from something like this, then this frontal has to get much longer. So Miles describes the basic cranial anatomy. He's a paleontologist, a trained paleontologist. His bread and butter is describing dinosaur bones. He's actually a dinosaur specialist. And he's naming all of these features in terms of dinosaur bones. Occipital bone, occipital foramen. Oh, the occipital foramen, that's a hole in the back of the head. That it's atypical in any other species. So it's unique to this species. Nobody knows why it's there, but there's a hole in the skull at the back of the head. Who knows why it's there? So we see he's labeling prefrontal ridge, nasal ridge, premaxillary. There's a dental plate, so a predentary plate. There are dinosaurs known with lost their teeth and developed plates. So this is, it's in their genes. They can do that. As a mastoid process, larger than ours, but it's a mastoid process. The parietal, the occipital. He's naming all of these bones in terms of vertebrate anatomy. And what we can see here is the frontal, and indeed the frontal bone is quite large. So this frontal seems to have expanded. Then we've got the parietals. This parietal here has also expanded dramatically, and you can see that, well, the skull would be, the spine would be entering, where would the spine be entering? Here. The spine would be entering here, and so just in here, and what has happened is the spine in this organism is entering here. So these bones here have expanded backwards, and that's why the back of the head is so large. And the head is actually balanced on its middle on the spine. It has holes in the skull. So these 3 holes here, that seems to be unique. Who knows what that's for? Let's say the platypus also has unique holes in its skull anatomy to supply the nerves and things like that for its bill. Who knows what purpose these holes could serve? It doesn't mean there's not a highly derived dinosaur. So if we look, we can see the holes in the skull. We've got antorbital fossa. Is this an antorbital fossa here? The dentary, external narus, the nose, the maxilla, the orbit, the frontals, the parietal at the back, his lacrimal, prefrontals. So he's describing the bones on this skull using his terminology as a vertebrate, as a dinosaur paleontologist. So in other words, he's recognizing dinosaur bones in the skull, but because it's so different than a dinosaur, he just has trouble to go that extra step and say it's a dinosaur. It's a very different dinosaur, in my opinion. Unique opening at the back of the skull, I mentioned that, no need to dwell on that. The foramen magnum. So you can see it has this distinctive square shape, and also the cervical ribs, not many processes on them, and it looks as though the neck may have actually been quite flexible. I saw somewhere that maybe it could retract its neck like a turtle, and maybe the head could really rotate around through a large number of degrees, kind of like an owl or something like that. And perhaps this squareness here is a means to lock the skull on to prevent it from dislodging during these motions here. So it would be a unique feature of this species, but just the fact that there's a square foramen magnum doesn't mean that this thing didn't evolve on Earth. Okay, because it shares so many vertebrate characteristics. Expansion of the cerebellum or hindbrain. I hinted at that before. So if this part of the brain wasn't there, then if the brain kind of came up here, then the foramen magnum would be entering at the back of the skull. But actually, we've had an expansion of this part of the brain, whatever this part does. So there's been a lot of talk out there in the UFO literature that if these are the alien greys, that they're telepathic. Maybe that has something to do with that, and maybe because I said that, this video won't be taken seriously, but nevertheless, it's a possibility. We don't know what sort of mental abilities would be conferred on an animal by expanding this part of the brain. Yep, so the brain anatomy suggests a very different type of large brain. So a rodent brain is small there, and we can kind of think our ancestral brain might have looked something like this. And we expanded the cerebellum. This hindbrain here is relatively underdeveloped with us, and maybe that hindbrain part, or maybe these parts of the cerebellum here, have expanded out the back here. So it's certainly a unique apomorphy in this species, but unique apomorphies can happen in evolution. Evolution's full of them. It doesn't mean that it's an alien, especially when it shares so many vertebrate characteristics. So, of course, the other possibility is that through convergent evolution, it did evolve on another planet, and it just happens to have all of these bones that look like ours. It's possible. So the mastoid process, this is the one where he thinks that the muscles attach here, which would give it large rotation of the head. And he says, for instance, 270 degrees would be like the three-toed sloth. So really rotating that head around. And I suggest that the square foramen magnum is related to locking the skull onto the neck so it doesn't get damaged in those movements. So how can we be describing a creature using vertebrate bone names if it evolved on a different planet? And I don't think that we can reasonably be expected to. When we can see so many bones that look like vertebrate bones, then like if it walks like a duck and it acts like a duck, it's a duck. It just looks like a vertebrate. The brain anatomy, would we have alternative consciousness, intelligence? Quite probably. And we might even have trouble conceptualizing the type of experience that this being has. It's totally beyond our ken. If they're still extant, perhaps that's why they remain aloof. So assuming that like they're out there and they're intelligent and they've been intelligent for longer than we have, then we're either uninteresting or too interesting. And what the situation is kind of a disturbing question. Why haven't they contacted us? And just remind that Socrates says that true knowledge exists in knowing that you know nothing. So we really know nothing about this, but potentially this is the most important question that humanity has ever faced. The eyes, eye sockets are large but not deep, with a pronounced edge and a channel for the optic nerve. So the eyes are actually quite large. Which, is it nocturnal? Is it a cave dweller? Maybe a cave dweller could explain how a species of dinosaur could explain the Cretaceous Tertiary catastrophe, and also perhaps the lack of a fossil record. Why we don't see a fossil record, because they're all in caves that we haven't looked at. Don't know. So Korotkov says in his book, in South America there are a great many caves or tunnels, practically unexplored, which are connected by endless intricate transitions. According to ancient Indian legends, in these tunnels chinkanas lived, people snakes or naga. The tunnels are called chinkanas, and in them lived people snakes or naga. Is that a tridactyl? Some people entered the caves out of curiosity, others hoping to find the treasures of the Inca people. Few managed to find their way out again, since dozens of people disappeared in the chinkanas in the tunnels. By order of the authorities, all entrances were sealed shut with lattices. And there's lots of information out there about South America's subterranean tunnels. Old chroniclers and cleric writers reported on tunnels and subterranean passages beneath many of the old cities and ancient ruins. And you can read about that at that site there. The mysterious tunnels of Teotihuacan. So you can just see it. That's searching for the word tunnel there. And basically they've discovered a tunnel that runs under the from the edge to under the center of the pyramid, but there are also side tunnels, which the Mexicans seem to, or the Aztecs or Mayans or whoever it was, seem to have deliberately blocked up. So maybe they're trying to prevent access of something from the tunnels to the region where humans go. Obviously, getting into speculation here, hidden underground tunnel could lead to Mayan entrance to the underworld. There's another pyramid there with a tunnel under it, and once again there's a network of tunnels, not just a tunnel, a network of tunnels. The ancient subterranean tunnels of South America. Although it seems incredible, there is a great deal of evidence to show that a network of ancient tunnels exists throughout much of South America. Legends abound on this tunnel system, and I can state that I've been inside some of the tunnels on this strangest of continents. So you can read that. So do these things live in tunnels? I don't know, but it's possible. So are they aliens? A lot of people have made the comment that these tridactyls just look just like the grey aliens that people talk about. Here's a site in Australia that you can buy a grey alien for your living room or your bedroom or front terrace or whatever. And I'll just point out that these ones have 4 toes, a good guess, but 4 toes and 4 fingers, and they've got a man-like chest, so they actually don't look like the tridactyls. But the head actually does come up under the middle of the neck comes in at the middle of the skull, so they've got that part right. If they were indeed modelling a tridactyl. So are they aliens, or have they been here all along? It's just as sinister, just as an intricate a question. If they've been here all along, if they're from Earth, and we don't know about them. So Miles says the skull has 3 cavities that run anteriorly or posteriorly from the front to the back along the maxilla and extend well into the temporal region. I've labelled these as lateral tissues. Extending the inner is the vertebrae. So if it's an ear, so the pyramid, the structure of the ear would be reverse of all other organisms on Earth. So this would have to be a highly derived state, but it's possible. So maybe, for instance, they went deaf and then regained their hearing through a secondary mechanism. In fact, mammalian, our rods and cones, they are in reverse order to all the other vertebrates around, because we originally lost our colour sense and got them back again. So those things can happen during evolution. As far as I can tell, there isn't a single example in the fossil record or among our current living vertebrates here on Earth with lateral sinuses. So that's these three holes up here, 1, 2, 3, and this larger one here. This is another point that favours their alien origin. Look, it just favours them being a highly evolved species, and they've had at least 66 million years since we could have seen their last fossil ancestor. So 66 million years in a lineage without seeing a fossil means a lot of change can happen. Okay, maybe they didn't come from Earth, and maybe they came from overseas, from into space. But if they did evolve on Earth, they've had enough time to develop features like this. And the number of vertebrate traits, the vertebrate nature of the body, just cries out that it is actually a theropod dinosaur. So, once again from the Miles paper, the forearms of this species consist of one bone that I'm designating the ulnaeus. All existing earthly species of vertebrates have two forearm bones, the ulnar and radius. This also holds true for all of the fossil record. This is the primary reason that Moltonus dolani can be identified as an alien being. It did not evolve on this planet. Okay, so now I'll take you back to the thought experiment with the platypus. No, let's say the nose of this species has a bill with electrosensing. All existing earthly species of vertebrates lack an electrosensing nose or electrosensing bill. This also holds true for the entire fossil record. Well, there is actually one discovered, but let's imagine that one's not there. This is the primary reason that the platypus can be identified as an alien being. It did not evolve on this planet. So you see, the argument is not binding. It could be, but it's not logic. It's not a logical deduction. It has this and therefore this. Its anatomical characteristics do not automatically let us conclude that that it's an alien. In fact, I would argue that it's stronger that it evolved on Earth. So, yet its morphology is otherwise, so this is me now, is so very theropod. It's much more reasonable, in my opinion, to call this a highly unique theropod. It's had 66 million years to evolve that other theropods haven't. It shares hundreds of features with theropods and other vertebrates. Jumping to the alien conclusion, premature and unwarranted and unhelpful in my opinion. So the conclusions are basically the same as for the last talk I gave. The full results need to be published. Detailed analysis of the unidentified DNA sequences. This seems to have stopped. The Russian who was doing it has died, I was informed. So as a trained zoologist, I would obviously classify them as theropod dinosaurs. They may be extraterrestrials or fakes. So like I said at the beginning, beware. They may be non-terrestrial, which would imply fantastic parallel evolution. They probably have DNA, and hence presumably ribosomes, glycolysis, etc., which we should be able to find. But maybe they don't have DNA. Maybe they're really aliens, and they don't have DNA. So there's DNA in the samples that those guys pulled out of them, but that's just perhaps all from the bacteria from that particular cave that wasn't in the database before. I don't know. That's why we really need a proper analysis of those DNA sequences. They just look like gastrulating eumetazoans of terrestrial origins. In fact, theropod dinosaurs. If these are genuine biological samples, they represent non-human intelligence because of the manufactured metal implants. And if they are dinosaurs, they're unlikely to have become extinct in the last 1,000 years. In other words, they're still there. and that's very highly likely. If the specimen is authentic, then it's very highly likely that that organism is still there. There've been no major catastrophes in the last 1,000 years that an advanced species wouldn't be able to succumb to it. Like 1,000 years ago, it's basically just before the Europeans got to South America. So presumably they watched the Europeans crush the South Americans and colonize the state, and yeah, we can't be very proud of what they would have watched, and we can imagine what they might think of us. So let's look for the truth. There are some keywords there. You can pause it. I've been through that in the last talk, and I just once again I'd recommend people who like who want to think about UFOs and or unidentified aerial phenomena, as they're called these days. These two podcasts I've found have very substantial, well thought out discussions on the topic. So that's it. Thank you very much, and we've gone just on the hour. Please, if you like this, follow me. Ask to tell other people about it. Like me. I'll keep trying to look into this because I think it's a really important issue, and it'd be nice if somebody other than my current 2 followers heard about this. Okay, thanks very much for watching. Bye till next time.